Good afternoon. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation to speak before you today. I am an agricultural engineer. I work for a company of MSA Professional Services based locally here in this region. I'm also representing today WAPAC, Wisconsin Association of Professional Agricultural Consultants. I am a professional engineer licensed in 7 states, and 7 states, but I have the pleasure of working with farmers on a daily basis. MSA as a whole is pretty unique. It's built on a foundation of working with municipalities. Just to name 3 of them for right now: water, stormwater, wastewater, certainly directly related to the conversation today. My division is housed within MSA. I'm located out of the Baraboo office. I work with agriculture, and most importantly, I work with manure every day. Mr. Boerner, not myself, are representing WAPAC, as I stated this morning or this afternoon. Up on the screen are resolutions. I'm not going to read them for you. I just thought they might be of interest to you. WAPAC is an association of professional consultants under a code of ethics who advise farmers in crop production, dairy nutrition, animal health, financial planning, engineering, regulatory compliance, education, and overall farm management. We represent these many fields of professional expertise to provide technical recommendations and ideas to increase production, profitability, and environmental stewardship in all facets of farming in Wisconsin and throughout the Midwest. So if I can ask for right now, I guess I want to bring you a little bit into my world and ask you to put your engineering hats on. And I'm not here today to ask anything. I'm here to offer myself and my company as a resource. Let's say a manure lagoon today. So this is a random map. I have no idea whose farm that is. I have no idea where it is. But let's talk a little bit briefly about how we would go about placing a manure lagoon to protect groundwater and surface waters. So theoretically, let's say that farmstead has 100 cows. Theoretically, 30 gallons per day of wastewater is produced. That's manure, bedding, and let's say wastewater, whether it's milking system washdown, housing washdown, things of that nature. So a number that I use quite often is 6 months of storage, and I'm sure you've heard that as well. So 100 cows, bedded on sand, 30 gallons a day for 180 days. That's 540,000 gallons of something. So if we step back a little bit, and we do the math as us engineers like to do, I'm going to recommend, or this farm would need a 94-foot diameter tank, 12-foot deep. So we need to be able to manage that facility as well, so let's put a ramp in it. So I'm going to recommend to the farmer, let's do a 100-foot diameter tank, just for this example. And the farmer tells me, that's where I want the tank. So there's some significance to this map. You will see purple lines, you will see abbreviations for soil classifications, you'll also see orange lines. The purple lines are what is called wetland indicators. So there is a likelihood that are wetlands in those areas. They're based on soil type. The orange lines are actually delineated or noted wetlands. This is a reference you can find right off the DNR website. Can I cite it there? Maybe. The first thing to decide on, in order to cite this is to deal with those wetlands. Certainly today, if I'm going to protect surface waters, which is a wetland, this is probably a concern. So there's several ways we can do this. We can contact the DNR and go through the wetland ID program. They'll give some recommendations, some opinions, and they may say, well, we can give you a determination, or you should hire somebody else to do it for you. So let's just say we hire a delineator. And let's just say, once the delineator walks out and does his analysis, he has now extended the wetland boundary to look something like this. This is a red flag. We come back as a cooperative team and we say, I'm sorry, farmer, but we can't place that tank there. So we move on. New scenario. Same facility. Farmer still wants the tank there. We do a delineation, third-party delineation. This is our new delineation line. That orange yellowish line now replaces the purple in that general vicinity. It's another, from based on that delineation, this might be a good site, but there's a few other factors we have to look at. The next factor that we typically look at when we look at project development here is groundwater. All manure storages today have a separation distance to groundwater and bedrock. For the sake of argument this morning, this is a concrete vertical wall tank with PVC water stop. I need a separation distance to groundwater and a bedrock of 2.5 feet. So I do 2 soil borings. Random placement, I just so picked them to be that way. Based on standards today, I need a minimum of 2 soil borings for any manure storage, or 1 per 15,000 square feet of surface area of that storage. 100-foot diameter tank, 7,800 square feet-ish, so 2 is adequate. Let's just say one of those borings, and if this site is perfectly flat, it's 8.5 feet down to ground level. So that becomes my limiting factor. So the deepest I can put this tank in the ground is 6.5 feet. So therefore, my floor of my tank is 2.5 feet above that ground level. In general, the tank is 6 feet in the ground. Next, this farm has a well. In order for me to place a manure storage, I have to be outside of a 100-foot radius of that well. So now I have 3 factors that appear to be adequate. If that was NR 243 or under the CAFO rules, that well setback is now 250 feet. Karst, certainly a discussion point we've had over the last several years. Direct conduits to groundwater, things of that nature. I randomly selected a point. So for tanks in the ground, I need a separation or a setback distance of 400 feet. If the tank is above ground, I need 200 feet. So just random sizes, they're all relative. There's no specific dimensions to that, but you can kind of see how this lays out. So for the factors addressed within American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers, as well as the standards outset by the Natural Resource Conservation Service, this would be an applicable space for a tank for about 6 months of storage on a facility with 100 cows. That's 100 cows as a head count. That's 140 animal units. I think that's important to note. You know, when we talk about CAFO and non-CAFO, we talk about head of animals versus animal units. I just wanted to point out to you, if you have never gone through that, 1 cow, 1 full-size lactating cow, is 1.4 animal units. So now that we've located the tank, and let's say we constructed it, now my colleague, Mr. Tim Boerner, can talk about nutrient management planning. Because really, as an engineer and agronomist, for consulting with farmers, it's important that we're a team effort to help advise and move agriculture forward in that particular farming progress. Last point before I do turn it over to Mr. Boerner, I do want to point out one thing here. This line right here is called an intermittent stream. That is also a criteria that we look at on a regular basis to whether or not we can site lagoons well. And there's other facets that has pertinence to citing infrastructure or structures for farms. Intermittent stream doesn't mean it's navigable, doesn't mean it's even there's water in it today. But that's important because what if we sited it here, and we all know we've had a pretty extreme spring, lots of water. What if there is a direct conduit that comes down here and connects into that intermittent stream? It's my job to help that farmer and give him advice to be able to, what happens if I can't get my manure hauled in the spring? What if I can't get my crops planted? And what if it continues to rain? We got to be able to handle that in case of emergency. So long term, that may not be the right spot. But today, in this scenario, I'm going to suggest to you that that's a pretty good place for that manure storage. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Tim.
We don't seem to have a copy of your presentation. Do you have, is that something you can send to us, at least we can get it on the website?
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you would send it to Jake and we'll distribute it to the members and put it on the website for the public.
Certainly. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Thank you, Andy. Just a little bit about my background. I've been a crop consultant agronomist for 35 years, and I've helped a lot of farmers plan for their, are you going to switch to slides in the future? I've helped a lot of farmers be profitable and with an eye on environmental. No farmer wants to have a fish killed. No farmer wants to be responsible for eating nitrates in the groundwater. And being the dairy state, you know, potential is there with all of them. But Wisconsin, in 1997, Wisconsin adopted the state rules for the 590 nutrient management plan. It was codified, the first edition was codified and became an effective in 2002. So the 590 nutrient management standard is there. The only ones, the CAPOs are the ones that it's mandatory. With regular farms, it's a matter of if they've been offered cost sharing, if they've had an incident. It's just, at this point, the state is only about 40% of non-CAPO farms actually have a nutrient plan. The actual DATCAP definition of a nutrient plan refers to the use of manure and other fertilizers to meet crop nutrient needs while reducing the potential for them to run off fields in the lakes, streams, and groundwater. But this is just a cover on one of my nutrient management plans, and it pretty much points out the farmed areas, the resource management areas versus the resource protection areas. And there are things in the code that determine where and when you can put nutrients out. Am I doing this right? Down? Okay. The 4 R's of nutrient stewardship is an old concept that's been revitalized by the Nature Conservancy and is now been promoted across the country. I became 4R certified, and I've been to several scenarios based training with other states, and I don't see where any of them have the nutrient management planning that Wisconsin has in place. Today, and for the lack, and I'm timing myself here, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm just going to talk about place and a little bit about timing of nutrient applications. The right source, the right rate are all important, and I'll just step back a little bit. In 1998, I got involved in the public hearings, public comment period on the code being put into effect. And my comment was that at that point I've been working with farmers for 20 years, and I don't know any of them that wouldn't take the nutrient credits from their manure. And it's just not economically, it doesn't make sense for them to put on more than it actually needs. So I raised that concern when they were talking about putting the 590 code into place, but as it turned out, there was a lot more to it than just nutrient decisions. I'm just going to run through a series of slides here for a recent nutrient plan that I wrote. And this is the aerial map of the fields for that farm. One of the technical expertise that we provide to our farmers is identifying and looking at the high-risk areas and areas that are needed to be avoided. Topographic maps are really important to show them that where we can or cannot winter spread. The soil survey, like Andy is using it for looking for places to put a manure pit, also has a lot, determines a lot as to where we can safely apply nutrients. And by the way, these slides are right out of SNAP Maps. Wisconsin has a program called SNAP Plus, which helps us to use the universal soil loss equation to determine where is the safer or the more risky places to apply nutrients and when. But taking the soil map, now this is one with all restrictions and it looks really busy, so I broke it out into different ones. If you look right here, this is actually Trout Creek, and it comes together with another creek. Creeks, that's referred to as SWCMAs, or surface water quality management areas. No manure applications are allowed within 300 feet of that. I believe there's another one, you can't see it very well because of all the other stuff in there, but there's a pond there, and standing water, it's 1,000-foot setback. Wells, you can see the wells there, that's 50 to 100-foot setback in that time of year. Now, looking at the slope part of it, of the equation, which the topographic map pointed out, is that really determines the winter spreading. And there really isn't a whole lot of places on this farm where winter spreading would be allowable. There it is. This field right here has a big area where you could spread manure or nutrients in the winter. It just turns out that this guy doesn't have an animal, so he doesn't have the need to spread. But this is the nitrogen restricted soils, the permeable soils that would be prone to nitrate leaching. Our soils are the ones with rock or bedrock that are close to the surface, and the W soils are soils that have certain that have the water table too close. So the dots are these, and they just cut off the legend. But so the horizontal lines are the R soils, the P soils would be the vertical lines, there's not a whole lot of those, and then the W soils are these dots. So, my last slide got cut off. One of the things that I've been involved in is, since I've started working with Agsource Laboratories, is I've been involved with the Water Action Volunteers, which is a UW Extension stream monitoring program. I also am involved with two farmer-led watershed groups, cover crop groups. We actually had a meeting yesterday. And the Pepin County Water Advisory Group. So I think, farmers are, and like the previous gentleman talked about as far as these watershed groups and farmer-led ones, that GATCAP funds those if they have enough people in that, and helps them to make decisions. Cover crops, well testing, there's a bunch of things that come out of farmer-led watershed groups. I think it's probably the best thing going, because peer-to-peer discussions definitely go a lot further than regulatory people telling them what to do. So I stayed within my time limit, so if you've got any questions, be happy to answer them.
Representative Crandall?
Thank you. So you mentioned that this guy doesn't have any animals in the example that you gave.
Yeah.
So why did he have a nutrient management plan to begin with?
Well, the nutrient management code says that any farmer should have one. It's just that the ones that have to have them usually have either had a notice of violation, a discharge, or they have to have a PDS permit. This specific one is there's a fracked sand mine that's opening nearby. So the county, as far as their siting regulations, asked them to have a nutrient management plan. So that's another thing. If the local siting rules demand it or ask for it, they have to do that to get a
So he
permit.
was forced to have it for that reason.
Correct.
So do you have any, because I asked DNR at the previous meeting, I forget, they could find out, especially with nitrates, a lot of that coming from crop farming, and since they don't take cost share and they're obviously not capable, but they don't have any animals, there's really no benefit to them to have a nutrient management plan, other than if they want to do it for economic purposes in their own sense.
Right.
So since you've been working in this for 20 or 30 years, Representative Kurtz and I were talking about the detail of that nutrient management plan, and some of my colleagues were probably surprised to see that, but if you open that up and show that to most farmers, they're just going to glaze over because it's so detailed. Can you think of a way or a possibility that we could make these nutrient management plans more farmer friendly and less intimidating?
That's what something, since this, the 590, the nutrient management has gotten to be the law of the land, that's a lot of my colleagues and I have worked to do just that. We have a farmer-friendly one version of it, not leaving any details, but a big part of the nutrient management plan is sitting down and going over it and making sure they understand it, and not just the farmers, but the manure haulers too. I've luckily, knock on wood, I've only had a very few manure spills that we had to, and it never got into place because we had quick response. So part of the thing that I've done with the capos I work with is have their manure haulers come in and sit down to look over those maps, make sure they understand them. Farmers, generally they just want something, and I've had farmers say, just give me a map for that one field and what I should avoid there. So we can break that down with the other ones. It's just for the 590 purposes.
So this will be my last question before I hand the mic to my colleague. So I would like, because I like the nutrient management plan, obviously, I think it's a huge benefit. Do you have any advice for the committee on things that we could do? Right now, I think farmers view the nutrient management plan as a requirement and as something that they have to do. How could we turn that into a service where they appreciate what's in it and it's more simple for them to follow and also an economic benefit for them to follow?
And I have farmers that they want their nutrient plan done before the end of the year so they can base their fertilizer purchases prepaid on the nutrient plan. There's some of them that follow it very, very closely. There is tax incentives. The Farmland Preservation is allowing a $7.50 an acre tax credit for farmers that that develop a nutrient plan and maintain it. So there's some of those incentives. Trying to get, and I've had this discussion many times, if you use a carrot or a stick, and they've been using the carrot for a long time, and especially NRCS, but when the funding or the cost sharing runs out, they tend to drift away from it. So I think the whole idea is to try to get farmers to value it as a planning piece. And that's something that was my discussion in '98 when I was doing, when I was talking to DADCAP when you're talking about putting this on. We don't need this. Farmers are already aware of the nutrient costs and the value of utilizing the manure. But, and that's why I picked these restriction maps, is a lot of them don't know where to put it. Where it's safe to put it, what time of the year. Nitrates leaching into the ground on fall applications, stay off of that in the fall. Put it on closer to when the crop is going to be coming off. But directly to your question, it's a good question. How do you get them to appreciate it for the planning document that it is? And bring it along with the restrictions on where not to put it and where it's safer to put it at different times of the year. So it's a good question, but we're wrestling with it for a while.
Representative Krug?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's no way you're going to get 35 years of experience if you have to look easy, so be prepared for a lot of questions. One of the ones that I had was, we talk about science-based solutions all the time, trying to figure out a way to manage expectations versus scientific reality. You've been in the industry long enough. Can you help me understand, we're talking 300-foot setback from manure application to trout streams, 1,000 feet from the pond, 50 or 100 feet from the well. what was, development criteria? I mean, is this something that still needs to be addressed, or are we looking at just, like Representative Trammell mentioned, more education for people to be involved and understanding better?
Well, CAFOs have it depends on what scenario they choose, but there's a no application period, 25 feet or more. And then they need to incorporate it, inject it on direct conduits to surface waters. So how that was developed and where they found that was safe, I don't know. It's definitely, I think a lot of the criteria should come in as to what type of soil is that's along that river. Maybe it needs to be more than 300 feet in some places, but that's strictly by the book, by the code. Those are the setbacks. So making them aware of it, I think, is the biggest thing. I've soil sampled fields before where I'm following a corn row and all of a sudden it drops down into the river. And it's like, well, they're not having any setback there. There's also, I thought that was the Trout Unlimited fella too was talking about maintaining those buffers and staying away from it. I think that's really good. If farmers are willing to do that, if they realize what they need to look at, and setbacks and buffers are definitely a big help.
Thank you.
Representative Kurtz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming to the best district, the 50th. I appreciate you doing that. And I appreciate everybody coming to the event today. So I got several questions. First of all, what would be the range of the cost for nutrient management plan? I know they're going to vary based on size and conditions. We'll give a ballpark for everybody listening.
Well, we base it on, it's a per acre charge, but then how many animal units they got. So the initial plan is what really takes up most of the time. So for a CAFO or anything over 500 animal units, we charge $6 per acre. For updates, it's $4.50. So that takes up the cost of the initial plan. For just a cash cropper that doesn't have any manure, it's $3.50 for the initial and $3 for the updates, and that's the range.
Okay, I don't mean to put you on the spot. So the one you displayed on the slides, what did that one cost?
That was $3.50 for the initial. Now, for them to update, it'll be $3.
And then, are there any other associated fees? And with that, how often do you do the soil testing?
Well, yeah, the soil testing is a separate fee. Generally, and it depends where the 590 code determines that we have to go one grid sample for every 5 acres. So, a lot of farmers will go even more, 2 acres, 2.5 acres. We also GPS everything, so we're working with a lot of fertilizer companies to variable rate lime and fertilizer applications. So, okay, sorry. I guess I'm not talking about that. But that generally runs, if it's exactly 5 acre fields, that runs about $4 an acre for the soil sampling, and that's once every 5 years. 4 years is what most of them do.
And this might be a silly question, you might have never done this before. Have you ever tested the soil in setbacks or buffer areas?
Definitely, yeah.
What did those compare to fields? I mean, because I'm a big fan of those. Scientifically, you've actually seen with those you see from the soil samples that these are working.
I've got very few clients that have been more than just 2 repetitions, and it hasn't changed a lot. The one nice thing about us GPS soil sampling is we can go back to that exact same spot. And one CAFO that I'm working with now, we tested it 4 years ago, and I was hitting those same spots that we did, before. The GPS allows us to get to that 590s about requiring that. And I know Wisconsin is toyed with it too, but not all soil samplers have the equipment that GPS soil planes. So, but yeah, those buffer areas, it'd be interesting. I'm actually working with a couple of farmers that have stewardship programs where we're doing soil health, and that's become a big thing with the no-tilling and building up the A horizon. We've got a lot of people looking at the biotic factor. There are billions and billions of things living in that top inch of soil, and if we can get that humus to keep building up, we're eliminating a lot of, it infiltrates better, it holds water better, it's not going to erode as easily, so we're definitely promoting no-till. And for a number of reasons, the tolerable soil loss numbers are much easier to manage that way too. Once you go and plow it or open it up, you kill a lot of that. So,
Thank you, appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Brooks? You gotta push the button. Hold it down.
I did.
It'll turn green.
It's a delay. Thank you for that information.
There's a help you guys.
Every button? I'll yell really loud, how's that? So during your presentation, I think one of you stated that Wisconsin was kind of one of the more strict states in the union, correct? Or leading the way? I don't want to put words in.
Yeah, the SNAP Plus program that the University of Wisconsin developed is the Cadillac nutrient management planning tool. Purdue came out with one a number of years ago that was really good, but this is really user-friendly. The SNAP Plus program, they've continued to update it. The SNAP maps, although they're busy and they're hard to see when you get all the restrictions on one page, they've developed that. So when I was in that 4-hour scenario-based training, I had a person from Illinois, Iowa, Ohio, and Michigan that we were all doing this 4-hour scenario-based training. And I said, well, let's pull out our SNAP Plus program. They didn't know what I was talking about. Illinois had spreadsheets. That's how they did their nutrient planning. So Wisconsin has put a lot of time and money into it, and I think have developed, and I think the other 4 people in our group agreed with it, that, this is better than what they got to work with.
So I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions.
As far as the rules, I think that's what you're getting at. They're pretty much the same. The 590 is an NRCS code,
Right.
and I think most states are following that.
So on a regulation basis, we're on par with most states in the country. I would say, and I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, is Wisconsin leading the edge? And I know with the program you just mentioned, as far as education, other things, are we middle of the road? Where do we stack up on education and those kinds of things and research?
Well, and I know Andy does a lot of work with farmers on that. The economic nitrogen and recommendations, that the University of Wisconsin has developed, MRTN, those have really changed the nitrogen application. I know our water advisory group is trying to get farmers to go more split applying nitrogen, spoon feed it, so it's not all there when the crop doesn't need it. It's just difficult to side dress nitrogen on corn when it's up and growing. And Pepin County got a lot of sand, so we have issues with groundwater in that county, with nitrates in groundwater. So anything we can do to get farmers to, short of telling them they can't grow corn there anymore, I think is positive. And I think groups like that around the state, county groups, are doing a lot to improve that stuff. As far as Wisconsin, there's, the UW extension system, it's brought me along for a long time. And I think there's a lot of great research that's coming out of our UW system and is available to anybody.
So again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing regulation, Wisconsin's on par with everybody else. Research, we're probably leading the way. Working with our partners, whether it's Trout Unlimited, and I personally think UW Extension and our accounting offices are probably second to none in the country. I think they do a great job. And I think most of this committee has supported additional funding for counties and county staff. So to me, you were sitting in my seat, it comes down to enforcement we heard earlier. We heard education and lack of participation. Those are 3 areas that I think we need to focus on. I guess if you're sitting in my seat, where would you spend the money? Because it's like, again, I don't think it's regulation. I think it's enforcement and participation and education. You tell me.
Well, and I've got farmers that are frustrated. They want to do the right thing. They want to protect their groundwater resources, but they see the guy down the road that's not doing that. you know, that gets frustrating. It doesn't encourage them to keep doing the right thing. So I don't want to encourage enforcement. I think farmers have enough to worry about than to have them coming down, but on their backs. But to get, I think, education and get it out there and have them appreciate a nutrient plan for what it can do to their operation and make it more efficient, that's where I'd like to see more focus.
How do we get the participation up? You mentioned the carrot versus the stick. If we can't always afford the credits or some kind of incentive, you know,
I have an idea.
I believe Representative Trammell has some ideas, Representative Kitchens has done a lot of work, but you guys are the experts, so we'd really like to hear from you. You know, if not today, after the meeting, think about that and give us some specifics if you think we could help improve the process.
I'll do that.
Representative Shankman?
Thank you. I apologize for being late. I had an executive session and couldn't miss a vote in capital, so it's been over here after. I just caught the tail end of your presentation, but I'm glad we're here to talk about nutrient management plans since it's something this task force has certainly had an interest in. At the Land and Water State Conference recently, a resolution passed unanimously to ask the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at UW-Madison to investigate and reevaluate their nitrogen applications so that they aren't just agronomic, but also look at more hydrologically sensitive regions of the state. And I'm wondering what you think about that and if you have any suggestions or recommendations for how best to start that conversation on the state level.
Conversations with starters is difficult. I can say that what our group in Pepin County has really been working on is to get farmers to, you know, discovery farms. I keep hearing the statistic, I attend a lot of meetings, that we're only 30% nitrogen use efficiency. And to me, that makes no sense. You know, it's economically, it's environmentally, it's not good. Reading a lot of articles about it, Nebraska, that's somewhere around 70% as far as nitrogen use efficiency. And, you know, nitrogen on the surface, if it's in an ammoniated form, you're losing it to the environment. You know, our atmosphere is 72% nitrogen. But if it converts to a nitrate form, if you follow the nitrogen cycle, then it's leachable. And on certain types of soils, sandy soils, it goes away pretty fast to where we don't want it to be. So anything to encourage farmers to improve their nitrogen use efficiency, I think is very important and would be a good thing. And I don't think I get your question at all. So.
But do you think it's, I guess, let's just talk about SNAP Plus for a second since people were chatting about that. I've been looking at just the additional guidelines that are built into the program, and just in general, for example, they'll recommend for maximum silage yield to use the N rate for the 0.05 price ratio. So you're automatically at the top of the scale just right away, and you actually have to uncheck that box in the program. And there's several places in the program where the presets are the highest amount of nitrogen application. So you actually have to be very well-researched to understand, to uncheck the boxes in the places, whether it's how much N is still in the soil, are you starting at 30%, 15%, 50%. Just looking at the computer program, looking at the 590 recommendations, what I've been startled by is the system is built for maximum nitrogen application, and people will be thinking probably, especially if they haven't sat down and gone through this with someone like you, oh, I'm doing the right thing, I'm following my nutrient management plan, but it could be that they're dozens of pounds over what they need to be at in order to get their yield, and their presets are just at 0.05. So that's the concern that I have. And again, you know, I would love to hear your experience in the conversations you've had with folks to see if that matches with some of the plans that you've seen.
Well, it's my understanding that the maximum, the MRTN, is based on the price of nitrogen and the growing yield, the value of the corn crop. So that should be floated, it should be shifted. And I know, especially this year, where commodities are in the tank and farmers are having a hard time making ends meet, we're using the lowest rates of nitrogen on all of my plants that we can get by with, other than with guys that have a lot of manure to use. Well, then they're getting all the nitrogen from manure. I hate to say it, but some farmers look at manure as a waste to get rid of, not a resource. It takes a while to get that mindset there. I'm involved with a large-scale composting project, demonstration project in Chippewa, in Chippewa County, and I think that could solve a lot of these issues for these farmers as long as we get enough carbon source. Unfortunately, most of them bed with sand, and which is a very low carbon to nitrogen ratio. So now we have to come up with enough carbon to boost that up. So I think handling has been a difficult issue with manure because it's been so wet in the fall and it's wet in the spring, and when you get it out there, and you really should get it out when the crop needs it. So sometimes that MRTN kind of gets bumped because of the manure factor in it. So that was pretty good.
So I can't directly answer your question, but, you know, we come to you as basically Switzerland. You know, both Tim and I, we sell knowledge and time. That's what we sell. We don't sell a product, we don't sell a pound of whatever. So there's that challenge within this state as well, particularly when you talk, you know, planning from the highest point of application to the end. But you can also talk about it from the perspective of engineering from selling the product as well. So a little bit different twist to answer your question, but I think there's a challenge to deal with there as well.
So do you think that people who have the incentive to sell more are going to recommend higher amounts of end rate application in their nutrient management plans?
Sounds like a setup question, but you know, I think there are trends. You know, I think, you know, we're a country built on capitalism and selling a product, and we're all good at something. I think we all approach solving the problem differently, but that's going to be a delicate balance to try to develop.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to point that out, that I think sometimes, especially if the computer program has those presets, and the people who are going to get the money, who are selling fertilizer, recommend the highest amount to people, it doesn't necessarily seem like we have the right setup there. So I think.
Well, and I'll add a little bit to that. I've had farmers come to me and say, well, I want you to do my nutrient plan because they're not selling fertilizer. And I don't think that it's really in the best interest of co-ops and fertilizer personnel to oversell it, but I can't say that doesn't happen either. You know, so.
I have one more question regarding split application. I think this task force has heard about split application at almost every hearing thus far, and it's generally considered a best management practice, but I did some research and found out that at least in some places, people are actually using more nitrogen when they split apply, and nobody knows why yet, since this is a generally new BMP, but I'm just wondering, based on your experience, if you've seen this happen or heard about it.
Nitrification inhibitors, polycoated urea, there's a lot of interest in putting, because it doesn't make any sense for a farmer to put it out pre-plant when the corn's not going to need it until it's knee high. And anything that slows down the conversion or the mineralization of nitrogen from one form, from a volatile form to a leachable form, is a good thing. As far as side dressing a nitrogen, I work for a laboratory, Agsource laboratory, so we do a lot of pre-side dress nitrate testing. We're also combining with ammonia testing now to try to get farmers to put it on when it needs it and evaluate what's there at the time for the developing crop. So there's some of those things that are being promoted. I'm not saying everybody does. As far as split applying and putting more on, I'm not aware of that specifically, but I wouldn't doubt that it happens.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Did I get everybody? Thank you, gentlemen. If you could get Jake your presentation, we'll get it online for you.
Thank you.